Hi everybody, I'm Bruce Whitfield and welcome to this Foresight webinar, The Warehouse Advantage. It's brought to you by Fortress Real Estate. In attendance today, we have a whole plethora of interested parties, from financial analysts to bankers to investors to property moguls. The global media is interested in this as well, as we go into a really in-depth look at logistics in South Africa, the global lessons that we learn and the global lessons we can teach. As I mentioned, we are brought to you by Fortress Real Estate, and this is all about logistics. This is all about the future. This is all about planning for a future that nobody can predict. It's exciting stuff. In an increasingly uncertain world, the certainty that we can provide by getting supply chains more efficient, going from what used to be a just-in-time global economy to a just-in-case global economy, as Pat Gelsinger, who is the chief executive at Intel, told me when I was in Davos earlier on this year, means that we have to cope with uncertainty. There's political uncertainty, there is societal uncertainty, there are huge issues of inequality in the global economy at the moment, the long tail of COVID-19. All of these uncertainties have to be managed, and so that is a key part of today's conversation with some of the best experts in South Africa from the world of manufacture, design, and of course distribution, plus of course the owners of the properties themselves, who are absolutely integral to this process. Shortly, we're going to hear from some very prominent figures in the world of logistics on the huge numbers of opportunities that are available. Thereafter, we'll cross to a panel discussion of some deep thought leaders in the world of logistics and warehousing. We've got Stephen Brown, of course, the Chief Executive of Fortress Real Estate, Mike Benfield, who's the Chief Executive of Max Steel, and in addition to that, we've got the Chief Executive of Relog, that's Gary Benatar. And from Pick n Pay, and he's in charge of all of their huge logistics, of course, is Marcel Basson. They're going to be talking about opportunities for growth. They may even just get a bit granular and a very big on detail of some world record breaking constructions that are happening here in South Africa. It promises to be a very good and wholesome introduction into the world of logistics. And don't forget, if you like what you hear, you can get more information. All you've got to follow is Fortress REIT on LinkedIn, and you'll get all the very latest and in-depth insights on the LinkedIn profile. Right, time to get straight into it. Rael Levitt is the founder and chief executive of Inner Space. We've also got Maciej Tuzinski, who is the chief executive at Fortress Real Estate in Eastern Europe. And joining us too is Monika Duda, the supply chain managing director for Poland at DHL, all coming together with some deep insight into the sector.
Well, the factors contributing to growth in logistics is primarily, in our view, around e-commerce. And we still believe that South Africa is in its early stage of e-commerce adoption. And certainly online retail, as it grows, as we grow the delivery economy, as many companies adopt new technologies, you'll see more and more growth in logistics. And it's still pretty early days in South Africa.
One can distinguish four factors. First one are the changes to the supply chain that took place following the COVID-19 pandemics, as well as the outbreak of war in Ukraine. Second one is the higher level of inventories, which are being stored by the large industrial players closer to the production facilities, which further stimulates the additional demand for warehousing space. Finally, the technological advances, which are allowing for modern logistic operations within the warehouse, are also causing the tenants to look for a newer space, attractively located, where they can move into in order to further optimize their operations.
Today, every company has to be a logistics company because this is how we are leveraging the deliveries and the solution for our customers. In CEE right now, we are in a very good time and place, and our region has become a regional logistics market for the Western Europe, because about 40% of all the requests which are coming to CEE region are from Germany or UK. Poland, it's very attractive when we are looking at the labor market comparing to the Western counterpart because we are 3 times cheaper than Germany and 4 times cheaper, for example, than Belgium in terms of the labor. Additionally, we still have a good availability of the industrial land and investment plots, which are also less expensive, and the process of the timing of the delivery of the industrial buildings is between 6 and 12 months. So compared to Germany or Netherlands, it takes half of the time.
While many of the larger companies have adopted e-commerce, and you've seen a huge amount of growth in the COVID era, we're certainly seeing a lot more e-commerce adoption with smaller companies who are delivering directly to consumers. And that will continue driving growth into the foreseeable future.
Each threat presents an opportunity. At Fortress Europe, we are strong believers that by offering our potential tenants with modern, state-of-the-art buildings located very close to the major urban hubs is providing them an opportunity not only to streamline their operations, but also to keep a lead on the operational costs.
Logistics requires a certain type of geography of where it's located. So for us, it needs to be within a sort of a 5-kilometer radius of any urban area where people live, for last mile delivery, for things like dark kitchens, and it needs to be near highways. And so if we're finding older buildings in older areas which are near the city, those are the contributing factors at which we look at when we acquire these buildings.
The investment case for CE Logistics remains as strong as ever. Such investments are not only allowing investors to generate higher yields than those achievable in the Western Europe, but also come at lower capital values of the projects in the CE countries compared with the Western peers. That means for each investor, not only that the projects are more profitable than those in the more developed countries, but are also safer from the long-term investment perspective.
It is important to observe the trends developments, be innovative, be able to adopt new ways of doing business, be close to the customer needs, and change can be both opportunity or threat. In DHL, we are demonstrating high level of market awareness, innovation, and flexibility. So we see current situation as a chance to increase our market share.
We see the factors in the world in terms of the growth of e-commerce as well as the supply chain disruption. We do see that actually as a contributing factor for growth, and we believe that actually there will be big demand continuing actually from smaller and medium-sized businesses in our sector, and so we do see it as actually a contributing factor. In our company, we have very little competition, and that gives us a bit of leeway and first move advantage to take advantage of the situation.
Right, next up, the long-awaited panel discussion, and that panel discussion, of course, features Stephen Brown. He is from Fortress Real Estate. We've also got from Max Steel, Mike Benfield, Gary Benatar, who is big in design and dreams up these incredible warehouses that you're about to see. He's Chief Executive of Relog. Then Marcel Basson, who is the end customer of this design and delivery. He is involved in the logistics process, very complex logistics process at Pick n Pay. Stephen Brown, talk to me about this warehouse advantage. It's a big theme in many parts of the world, and there's been an explosion in the sector, certainly in South Africa.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I think there has been an explosion everywhere. I mean, we saw with COVID really the huge acceleration in e-commerce and in retailers gearing up for e-commerce, and I think it's been interesting to see the progression of that over time. I mean, even now with retail, and I think the world kind of forgetting about COVID, it's still there. And really what we're seeing in SA in particular is retailers leading that charge in terms of looking for more space, for better space, and a consolidation of space into one, as is the case with Pick n Pay, one sort of distribution center. We're a little bit of a follower of what the tenants are looking for as opposed to an outright leader. We're sort of guided by the likes of Pick n Pay and Marcel and his team in terms of saying, well, this is what we need, this is how much space, and then we, have the land and the capabilities to build the space, and then we'll go to someone like Gary to help us design the space, and someone like Mike to, make sure that there's the product stays dry with a really great roof, and that he, guarantees that for 10 or 15 years. So I think that's really been the big driver. What's also interesting in the warehousing space is the technology in terms of, what Max Steel can do in terms of the roofing, what we can do with the post-tension flooring, with the concrete, and all of that really enables these super distribution centers, well north of 100,000 square meters, to actually be built and developed. I think several decades ago, you just didn't have those technological advancements. So you were precluded from doing that. Hence, people had these little sheds everywhere in industrial areas, but that's kind of gone now.
So, Marcel, I've seen pictures of these enormous warehouses, and I think we've become more commonplace with these things. But this warehouse of yours is an absolute monster. There's an image of it now, and it looks like it's rugby fields in extent.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, that's our super distribution center, as Steve was calling it before. Look, it's a really big facility. It's built on land of well over 350,000 square meters, and the facility itself, also touching on 150,000 square meters. It's a really big facility that's gonna enable Pick n Pay to leapfrog in terms of our ability to serve our customer.
How on earth, Gary, do you go about designing something like this? It's a monster.
It is a monster, and it is quite a tough call, because one of the biggest things that we had to do was try to design it in such a way that it reduced Pick n Pay's operating costs. And the secret to this design was the composite building. So everything is one building, and that's unique. So it's a composite building, perishables, ambient, all together. And through that, we were able to share immense services and infrastructure which doesn't get duplicated, and allows us for very efficient transport and loading, co-loading between ambient and perishable. So the trucks going to stores where a big portion of your supply chain costs are as well. So it's all about efficiency, and this is really going to be a game changer for Pick n Pay.
What does it take from conceptualization to delivery of a finished project for something of this scale?
We started this conceptually in 2018.
And, I mean, COVID obviously got in the way. You would have delivered it more quickly had there not been the small matter. So in order to deliver something like this, I mean, it's at least a 3-year project, which gives us a sense, of course, of anybody who wants to play in this space, just what the timeframes are.
And remember, the planning and the design up front is probably the most important thing, because that's your foundation. And the more time you've got to spend on that, the more you get that right, then it allows you to build with less VOs, changes, design on the fly, and allows them to build on a fast-track process. And this is where we are with Pick n Pay. So it's been very functional through this process. There's been very little change to the design from the initial concept that was signed off originally.
And then, Mike, I mean, I wanted to provoke a response, and I did with Stephen, but these are enormously high-tech ventures, and particularly when you talk about the sorts of spans and the sort of steel work that is required in there. Is this something you've ever done before?
Yes, Bruce. There are a number of warehouses that we've done over the last 5 years. I think, ultimately the beauty is what the engineers and the architects come up with. They design the structural elements. We're just supplying the steel, and in certain cases we would add the value to elements of the structure. And the roof is where the beauty sits at the moment. We've come up with something there that allows the owner, the professional teams to try and get this structure off the ground up into the air as fast as possible, by eliminating, the laydown areas, putting it up at height and rolling it onto the roof immediately. There's no hauling the roof sheeting up 15, 20 meters, damaging the product in that process. And I think we're in a nice space in terms of that. So we've done a few of these, and we look forward to more.
Okay, that's enough nerding about the technical aspects of these warehouses. When it comes to the business of logistics, Stephen Brown, I mean, this is the elixir, I suppose, of margin anywhere in any enterprise, anywhere in the world. And these things have got to be absolutely purpose-built and purpose-designed for optimal efficiency.
They do, Bruce. And I think, with the likes of the distribution center that, is going to become Marcel and his team's home for 15, maybe even, longer than 15 years, you need to make sure that it is purpose built, but it's also generic and flexible enough to cater for the future. And when we're doing these warehouses and slightly smaller distribution centers that are actually in the park in which the Pick n Pay distribution center is. So that whole piece of land is 100 hectares, of which Pick n Pay occupies 35 hectares. So we try and keep them as kind of high tech as we can, but it also needs to be generic enough that it can cater for the changes in either users or changes in technology, such as, racking, and we've seen a lot of these forklifts that used to be sort of limited to, let's say, 10 or 12 meters, and they can now go 13, 14 meters without specialized floors. So I think we do try and cater for multiple tenant needs, but then also allied to that is the likes of Pick n Pay, where they have quite a specific operation and they need certain things for certain products. So with that one is slightly more specialized than our generic build.
When we look at it, Marcel, in terms of the intricacy of the structure and the design, and when it comes to the internal use, we've all seen those horrendous videos, the sort of videos that make you wake up with palpitations at night, where somebody clips something with a forklift and the entire shebang comes collapsing down. I mean, the scale, the vastness, and the huge nature of this, it's cathedral-like scale of these things, is nothing short of extraordinary. Internally, what do you have to have in place?
Yeah, I think, Bruce, we're really blessed to have really good partners to work with. I think that's the key component to this to the success of this supply chain solution, right? So Gary and the team is a group of people that we lean on heavily in terms of working with us to create, not only design the distribution center, but also be, our eyes and ears in terms of every piece of steel and every, piece of equipment that comes together in that distribution center. So I think, really good business partners for me is key in creating this, not only from choosing the land, making sure that is affordable and it's got a really good finance structure, but from equipment selection, and then from putting all of that together, you need really good stakeholders, you need really good partners to take your hand and make sure that every piece of this equipment goes into that distribution center to be able to at the end sort of get together and hum, right, and be affordable and make money for you as a business.
Gary, what's the design life of a warehouse like this? I mean, things change in office buildings. If you miss 6 months in Joburg and you come back after a period of time, you go down Oxford Road, for example, the landscape has changed fundamentally every 6 months. Buildings get torn down, new structures go up. We used to a fairly short lifespan on office buildings even. I don't know, in warehousing, is it beyond the 15-year lifespan, or is that the ultimate sort of design mechanic that you use?
So we fundamentally try to design around the principles of good design and good flow. So once you get your fundamental flow on site right, your SDP, how the trucks go, you've got fairly good flexibility. That's not going to change much. Then the internal operations are going to change over time. So what we try to do is design this, and that's why we challenge the likes of Mike to build us bigger and bigger spans, because we turn the shed into a big hall. And in that process of over 15, 20 years, you're depreciating your materials handling equipment probably every 5, 7, 9 years. And as the technology changes, you strip it out and change it again. If the column centers are big enough and the height internally is big enough, you've got the flexibility to retrofit new tech without changing the fundamental building. And that's what we've tried to achieve with the Pick and Pay building. So we've designed for a 15-year lifespan on what's going live right now. I do believe the building would be more than suitable for 30 years.
I mean, and to that point, Mike, I mean, there's been a world record set recently for spans and size, and it seems almost we're testing the limits of design all the time.
Yes, Bruce. I think steel, if you use steel as an element of the properties required, it has its limitations. It will have you can't put too much weight on. It has load-bearing capabilities. It can only go so far. And then you're going to put a pillar or a column in the middle, somewhere to support it. And that'll probably limit the designers and the use of the warehouse in the future. I'd like to just go back to the point where, as a warehouse owner myself, I would like these warehouses to last 50, 60 years. I don't want to be replacing and moving space every 15, 20 years. So certainly it needs to last a lot longer than that.
But I mean, the structural integrity is such that it's feasible that these things could be around 50 years from now.
Absolutely. It's absolutely feasible. Steel lasts a long time. I think the guys are innovating all the time in terms of design. And the alloys are changing all the time in terms of tensile strength and things like that will help create bigger buildings in the future. I think you mentioned the world record. The Pick and Pay warehouse is 280 meters end to end. That's the world record in terms of the longest single roof sheet that we rolled there. A Guinness World Record. Very proud of it. And it's really due to the technology innovation that we came up with in terms of sky forming. We literally hoisting the mill up to the eave height and rolling it from a container where the mill's placed in and rolling it straight onto the roof from that perspective. And where innovation's taking us even further, we talk about getting these boxes built as quickly as possible. We're now thinking of putting another system mill on the other side of the roof and rolling 2 sheets at a time. It's called a lefty and a righty because they've got to have different profiles and they've all these sheets have to link into each other. And that's the sort of innovation we're trying to come up with, ultimately to remain competitive and be a forerunner in this type of box warehouse manufacture or building. We need to be innovative in this space, and I think from an owner perspective, they want these boxes up as fast as possible. They don't want interest being capitalized to these structures for a long period. They want to get going. So I think the onus is on the suppliers to continually innovate and provide solutions to the professionals, the engineers, etc., the architects, and ultimately the owners to help them bring solutions to the fore very quickly.
It strikes me, Mike, that there's a huge amount of local innovation going in here. Global best practice is one thing, but you seem to be leading in some aspects of global design then.
If I can interject, one of the big things that has really changed the game is also the floor. So historically, the floors were designed to your layouts. And it's like a town planning. You have main roads, side roads, freeways, high trafficked areas, and you would design those floors for that type of environment. This Pick and Pay floor is designed to be a jointless floor with special, where there are joints, they're co-sinus joints that have no effect as you travel over them. And this doesn't limit us in the orientation of the racking and the technology we can change to in the future. So it's layered in a different layer of flexibility for the future. We can pick up the whole building, all the racking, take it all out, put it through a crushing mill and put a whole new set of technology, but the building will suit that.
But it's revolutionary, isn't it, in terms of ensuring then the stability and the durability and the endurance then of the tech.
And what we're doing with a post-tension floor combined with co-sinus is a world first. In fact, the engineer designing it presented this at an international conference in Czech Republic a couple of months ago.
And Mike, it talks to the point, isn't it, then, of South Africa innovating and leading in at least some aspects of warehouse design.
Yeah, look, I think steel supply and the role of Max Steel in that is a small one. I think a large portion of us rests with the designers. You know, they're challenging the rest of the supply chain to come up with innovative ideas to help them develop this technology. And we're all there. You know, I think we have to be. You know, the world is a tough global space. We have to innovate all the time, and we're very happy to be participating in that type of development.
The fact we're in South Africa puts more pressure on us, because the geography and the economics of South Africa, with a major economic activity in Johannesburg being 65%, means that our Johannesburg facilities have to be that much bigger. If you go to Europe, you go to England, there's such a spread of activity that they build more smaller facilities. Even in America and the rest of Europe, they don't have to have these one mega center covers all, because they've got economic mass and activity spread out that can justify and give them a return on investment and the economy of scale. In South Africa, to a bit Australia as well, we end up with this whole concentration in one place, which means that we have these mega centers. So our 165,000 square meter center is unusual. In America or in Europe, you're talking 40, maybe 50, 60, 70,000 square meters as a big center.
And of course, size isn't everything, is it, Stephen? I mean, you know, we got the mega ones, and they're very impressive, and the tech is amazing. Yet the warehouse advantage isn't just about size; it's also location. It is, you know, this isn't just about the mega warehouses.
Yeah, absolutely, Bruce. I think part of our job is really identifying those locations and where the highway network's going to come and where we think the future nodes will be. That's really our, you know, one of our core jobs to get right, is to say, you know, this is going to be a core location going forward for the next, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 decades. And that was where we identified the site that Pick n Pay is going to occupy. And I think as we see, things do change. You know, these nodes sort of change over time. The old industrial nodes, like, for example, down south of Johannesburg, are old and they sort of decaying, and, you know, hopefully in time, if we get the economy right, they'll be repurposed into something slightly better. So, you know, we've seen Pick n Pay move out of what's still a very prime node, Longmeadow, out to the R21 to Eastport. I think, you know, maybe Marcel can provide some color as to why they wanted to go there, but I think we identified that site as less congested, better highway networks, and that always happens. I think the advantage for us is that as cities expand, and there's still, you know, even in, for example, Eastern Europe, where we've got some warehouses, there may be population declines, but there's still rapid urbanization. And as those urban edges start to incorporate these older logistics nodes, you can repurpose that real estate to something else, and then there'll be a new highway or, you know, a new intermodal facility or something like that, and we need to identify that and go and purchase the real estate for tenants, you know, in the future to occupy.
And you've got to be taking a 10 and 20-year view on this. And how reliable is town planning in South Africa nowadays? One gets a very clear sense that it may be not as reliable as it used to be.
Yeah, the town planning gets interesting. If you look at the amount of, for example, warehousing and logistics rights that you know, in the spatial development framework that has been identified in Ekurhuleni, it's probably multiples of anything that a country our size could ever use. But really, what's restricting that in terms of just the availability of land is, yes, if you fly over South Africa, everybody says there's so much flat land to build warehouses on. Yes, but you need to have it serviced and you need to have it zoned correctly. And in the servicing is where I think there's a huge advantage for a company of our size and scale, in that it is enormously expensive to take these huge sites and get them serviced. So generally we will buy them zoned and serviced, but we have a lot of partners, for example, M&T, who did the Eastport site, who will then rely on our balance sheet to get a 1 million square meter site zoned and serviced, because that involves the electrical infrastructure, often the sewage and the water. And the problem with the municipalities, specifically in South Africa, is that they are looking to the private sector to do that and to pay for it. Whereas at least in Eastern Europe, you know, we pay the rates and the municipalities do that stuff. Here we seem to do it and pay. It doesn't seem particularly fair, but we're still making it work.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a plan. Otherwise, you sit on the sidelines and wait, and you become like Dr. Seuss in the waiting place, and you're waiting for somebody to do something. It'll never happen. So you got to take the initiative on that. When we look at it, Marcel, in terms of your ability to look into the future and to appreciate that the demographics of cities are going to change fundamentally, if you compare what Gauteng looked like 25 years ago to what it is today, you've got to have a vision of what it's going to look like 25 years from now. How on earth do you even begin to conceptualize that as a retailer?
Yeah, Bruce, I think that's a really big challenge for us. It's impossible to read tomorrow's paper today. So, and with South Africa changing so fast, I think it's a really big challenge between all of us to make sure that we get it more right than wrong. And I think that's what we try to do here is, I think there's a few concepts that you need to bring into the conversation that obviously guides you in the decision. And a few of them would be, affordability. There's a cost of creating these really big distribution centers. As Steve was saying, you need flat land, but you also need stable land. And that's actually quite a scarce commodity, as not only flat, but really stable
But particularly in Gauteng, because we've been undermined literally for the last 140 years. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a factor that's really important in the conversation. I think another one is the waypoints. We've got an infrastructure of where our stores are located, and we need to create a waypoint that actually makes economical sense, because transport in our supply chain is by far the biggest expense. And with fuel escalating the way it is currently, it needs to make economic sense that your travel distances is something that you can control, because that adds cost to the product. And of course, the reason why we are doing this is only for the customer. It's not to break a record or to be the biggest or the smartest. We're doing this 100% for our customer. And if we don't do it, every single piece of it is not customer centric, then we're doing the wrong thing. So that's sort of something that we keep in mind in every decision. Something else we think is really important is accessibility, right? So we've got a really large infrastructure of suppliers or vendors that needs to reach us, because we are centrally distributing product, and they need to have access to us as well. And that we also bring into the conversation. And then, of course, these really big centers, requires really big amounts of people that, labor for our distribution center to actually work and function. So we have to bring that into the conversation and to the equation as well, to make sure that it's accessible for them to come to us every day, to work with us. And of course, for them, transport is also really, a big expense. So throw that into the pot, mix it, and you've got a really exciting challenge or problem, and I think that's the way we think about it. Of course, we've got a really clear business strategy of where we want to go as Pick n Pay in terms of our stores. We're a business of stores and therefore a business of customers. And we've got a really clear view of where we want to develop in terms of our store base. And that, I think, guides us, in all of those different aspects the most on where we go.
Just give us some context. You even mentioned a move from Longmeadow, which looked like you were going to be there forever. Just no longer fit for purpose?
Yes, Longmeadow distribution center is not fit for purpose now. In the future, it is fit for purpose now. Look, I think these things, these really big capital projects, is really important to give enough lead time, right? So it's not only big in size, it's also, you need to think about it and give yourself enough time to construct, put together, kit out, and be operational when you get the demand that comes your way. And to build that also into a timeline is really important. So we've got an expansion plan in our, what we call our inland region, which is Gauteng, Northern Free State, the Northern Cape, etc., that services, that get serviced by these distribution centers. And our growth, our strategic growth shows us that we need to get out of that facility at a certain point in time. So we project that over time, and then we build lead time into it. We obviously then build a build phase into it, a kit out phase into it, and a go live phase into it, because we can't have any interruption in that process. And then we try and hit a date that would combine, zero disruption in the supply of goods to stores, and that moment where we would potentially hit the ceiling in the Longmeadow distribution center, for example, and that's when Eastport goes live, and theoretically it's a seamless cutover.
And so much of South Africa's transport now is dependent on fuel. We've been talking about the cost of fuel and diesel prices going through the roof. Of course, there's a reason why the Rand Refinery, for example, is where the Rand Refinery is. Because it was at a huge railway intersection, and gold could be processed at the Rand Refinery and on secure trains be shipped off to ports, and the Krugerrands could get to market and all of those sorts of things. I wonder, Mike, if we have not lost sight of the huge advantage of rail, which we seem to be moving further and further from rail. Shouldn't we be almost building closer and closer to rail to force, if it could ever happen, a Transnet to come to the party?
Can't agree more, Bruce. 10 years, 15 years ago, Max Steel used to receive all its bulk steel in rail form. We have sidings at our major depots around the country. All the rail lines have gone. People are building houses on the rail reserve today, and we're relying on trucks, and it's congested. Maybe we should come to Steve to get a new warehouse built, but but essentially,
is it feasible though? Is it feasible to revert back to the days of rail and rail power, the scale that rail can bring?
But Bruce, I think we don't have a choice. We can't afford all these trucks on the road anymore, and it's just so congested. We don't enjoy driving on the roads because of all the trucks. So we've got to find an integrated approach to bring rail to the party, force government, force Transnet to become relevant to our demands as consumers in this country.
Is it something that you're considering, Stephen? I mean, can it be part of your thinking?
So, I mean, just to be frank, it was part of our thinking. We have a rail siding at Clearwood, one of our biggest industrial parks in KZN, and we spent about 6 years negotiating with Transnet, and eventually gave up. So, I think it's quite sad, as Mike said, to see. I think we're missing a whole lot of efficiencies in the entire system. And if we look at some of our assets in Isando, for example, there's still that Isando rail network to which we contribute every month. But it's not used. And really, Transnet needs to engage more proactively with the private sector, and to unlock that opportunity and to get things done. And as we've seen with the mining, to get all of the commodities offshore to the ports and get the dollars or euros or yen or whatever foreign currency we're getting into the country. But we can't do it in isolation on our own, and we need government to be perhaps more flexible. And I think look at that PFMA structure, which in my view is just a massive inhibitor of doing effective business for SOEs, and then get more involved in the oversight and the policing rather than trying to legislate absolutely everything. And I think that's where we see in our engagement, certainly with SOEs, is that the PFMA is a massive inhibitor to doing business with them.
As Andre de Ruyter, the chief executive of Eskom, often points out, I mean, in order to place an order, and if he came to Max Steel to place an order, he'd have to wait for 300 documents, 500 days, approvals, and all sorts of things, by which time the opportunity has passed. And yeah, that is a huge constraint. Gary, when it comes to...
Can I jump in? Can I jump in on the rail?
Before I ask a question, please jump in, Gary.
It's a passionate topic of mine. One of the biggest problems we have in South Africa is we do not have a strategic master plan for logistics going out 25, 50 years. I've done work in Dubai, in Switzerland, in Europe, and all these countries have an overall logistics master plan, thinking about logistics, transport, and how things are going. I remember working in Dubai in 2001, and I was told about the monorails that are coming, the airports, the Jebel Ali 2, all of those things that you had to build into. I did work in Switzerland in 2016, and I was informed that I need to make sure that my warehouse is compatible with a underground transport system that will move rolltainers of products into cities on levitation, so that the last mile will be done with automatic electric vehicles, and that system will be going live in 2030 with the help of Elon Musk. Okay, and this was a planning in 2016. They had a master plan. In South Africa, we've got no overall master plan strategic. We've got everyone vying for their little castle that they're trying to build. Transnet doesn't talk to Portnet. Portnet doesn't talk to railways. These guys don't talk to roads. And nothing is integrated. And the only way to make rail work in this country is you've got to integrate your whole modal transfer of product, because rail works on bulk, on inbound, on containers, on export. It doesn't work on last mile, but you need a last mile system that integrates with that. Ideally, we should have distribution centers where the customers are. Most of our clothing retailers have their DCs at the coastal thing because they bring in containers of clothes, and it's very expensive to get containers to Joburg. So they de-stuff them in Durban. And then we run everything by road up to Joburg, which could be on rail. But we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have anyone driving that process. So the whole logistics mechanism in this country is a mess because of that. We then work in a roundabout way to try compensate as best as we can for all the inefficiencies. We try to design them out. We try to design the right infrastructure. We work with Steve to get the right land in the right place and put that type of infrastructure together and make sure that it works. But we actually are solving symptoms of a problem. We're not solving the fundamental problem. And that's one of the things that South Africa has a major inefficiency. Do you know that South Africa has its major economic hub the furthest away from any navigable water in the world?
It's geology's fault. I mean, the gold was here, so we put the city here. And unfortunately, the gold is finished and the city is still here.
And we used to have railways that were legislated. When they broke away the legislation, the pendulum swung right away to the wrong side. And we haven't come back to this middle at the moment. And that's where the problem sits. It's going to take time.
Do you know how I know that the National Planning Commission still exists? And it's because I got a little logo on my vaccine certificate during COVID. There it is, the National Planning Commission. It exists in name and unfortunately name only. And cities like Dubai don't exist through chance. It has been a very clear, strategic, planned process. And you look at the old pictures 30 years ago versus the pictures today, it's as the result of planning. But we don't have the central planning. So it puts us into the situation that we're in, and then you have to make a plan and work around. So what then, Gary, are the big trends that you're seeing in terms of, yes, the big warehouses are lovely and dramatic and Guinness Book of Records. That is all well and good. Are we seeing any trends towards localization in the way, I think Stephen was talking about it earlier, in parts of Europe where you're getting smaller distribution centers serving smaller communities?
So we're definitely seeing that. The big growth at the moment is retailers and businesses are moving their inventory centrally. So they need to put it into a warehouse, into a DC, distribution center, and not in the store. So the move away from having big stock rooms at the back of store and inefficiency where you've got the wrong stock. When the customer comes in and it's in the wrong store because they've overstocked that store, they can then top up that store from a central place. And that's driving us to have bigger distribution centers, wherever it is. Even if we regionalize them and have 5 DCs around the country, they've got to be bigger than what they used to be because the stock rooms are coming down. And then e-commerce has obviously changed that landscape because the demands of the e-commerce model is instant fulfillment. And the customer wants the product now. He knows what price it is. He's done all his online research and he knows what his options are. And therefore, for stores to be efficient in the space, they've got to be able to do fast response and accurate delivery at a very fast time. And the only way they can do it is with the correct availability of product. And that's very important going forward. So customers are looking for, and the customers we talk about, the customers in the warehouse space, they're looking for efficiency, cube storage space, efficiency in processing, and a fast response with low-cost operations. And obviously, the bigger you make the facility, the more economies of scale works.
One of the positive effects of COVID-19, of course, has been the huge uptake in e-commerce, but that's also then changing the dynamics for distribution centers and for the way logistics works, because that instant fulfillment, of course, that we were talking about just a moment ago, needs to be realized. And if you go into your local supermarket, you have to sometimes duck and dive depending on demand as the pickers come through on the shelves and are loading trolleys. They know where everything is and they're moving at the speed of light. You may be trundling along in your old school DIY version of going shopping. But this is creating, I'm sure, a huge challenge, Marcel, for retailers like yourselves who need to be closer and closer to your customers who are further and further away from you virtually and almost physically as well.
Yes, Bruce, absolutely. I mean, the market has moved, and COVID has obviously changed a lot of things in our environment, including this. And the market has moved to being extremely convenient, right? So customers are very demanding, and they've learned new patterns. And as retailers, we've responded. And you've seen in the marketplace the amount of small motorbikes riding, on our national roads, where we're taking, stock to our customers. So we've also responded as Pick n Pay, and I think this is a very exciting, channel for us. It's a different supply chain solution than our mainstream supply chain solution. And I think the really big thing here is customer service, number one, because we're going to the front door of our customers, but also secondly, affordability. So I think internationally, and also we're not excluded from this, is we are, the big challenge in this supply chain channel is making it affordable. And still driving the same kind of margins through the business, because of the long, the travel distances and the amount of effort involved in actually taking the stock from our stores or our dark stores into the customers' houses and shelves and fridges. It makes it a really costly exercise. People are involved in terms of picking, what you alluded to in between our shelves, and I think we are a place where retailers have responded. And we in this moment now where COVID struck, we saw a move in demand. It was quicker than what our omni-channel strategies in South Africa was planned to actually develop and design before. We converted in the minute, in minutes, we converted some of our sort of more informal supply chains into very formal supply chains to move stock to our customers with small motorbikes. And now, of course, now that we've got, 10 minutes after COVID sort of gave us a break, we are in a space where we can more formally put a strategy together that could be more sustainable, give better availability of products to our customers, and can be more affordable. And I think that's the next challenge is, as retailers, obviously, we always want to be innovative and we want to respond to the customer immediately. But now after the storm, we get back together and see how do we do this more sustainably and more affordably, because the market's not coming back. We can see that clearly. Customers that shop online, whether it is in the more formal scheduled environment online or in what we've got our ASAP, environment where you get your stock within 40 minutes, that's channel is actually something that's going to stay where it is. And we can see that trend continuing. And that's why, for example, Pick n Pay, has partnered with Mr. D, and it gives us a way to leapfrog the industry, right? So immediately, due to this business agreement that we've got with him, we've got access to millions of customers that we didn't have before. It makes it really easy for customers when they log on to the Mr. D app to see whether they want something from a restaurant or they want something from a grocery shop, and immediately that comes from a Pick n Pay shelf. Now, as I've mentioned before, I think the challenge for our retailers is how do we move people out of our aisles in our stores to still make it reasonably accessible for our customers into a supply chain solution that's affordable to keep the service levels at the levels it is right now and still, grow the market share in that sector.
You mentioned, and it was a term that I came across for the first time the other day, dark stores. I've heard of dark kitchens, where people during COVID were preparing food in an agnostic fashion. You'd have Chinese over here, Indian over there, pizza over there, and one delivery guy would come in and pick up a pizza, an Indian takeaway and a Chinese takeaway for the same family, and go and do the delivery. Is what is happening in terms of suburban distribution, for example?
Yes, that's definitely a channel most retailers go into. And a dark store is really it's a distribution center / warehouse that you create for an online and an omni-channel solution, right? So it doesn't need the same amount of people working in that facility than in a normal standard warehouse and distribution center. And it's, a lot of retailers go, sort of really high on tech there, really robotic there, so that it's quick. We save time, because one of our channels there is obviously going to the customer within a certain time span, which for us is 40 minutes or 60 minutes or an hour. So you need to move really quickly. You need to be really accurate. And that's what creates this opportunity for what we call, or the industry calls, a dark store. A shed, as you mentioned before, with products in it. It's very accurate. It's stacked and stocked in a certain location, and you can move extremely fast without people, bumping into each other. Now, again, I think it goes to affordability again. So there is a threshold where the demand for this sector and this channel gets to a certain point where you've got to start looking at dedicated facilities, which in this case, a dark store, to be able to service that channel. Otherwise, stores gets too congested, and your main standard and distribution center is just also too large, and it brings too much complexity into it. Yeah. So a really big demand for that, absolutely.
Gary, do you see much of a market for those dark stores?
Yes, so it's an interesting concept, because your dark store and your omni-channel or your e-commerce delivery is dependent on your distance to your customer, so that you can service geographically from a certain point to that customer within that time point. And if you've got enough scale and economic mass, you can invest in a dark store. So what we're seeing is retailers jumped in with COVID and they shopped in store. And you have the woman pushing her trolley past you, bumping you out the way, because she's got to get that packet of goods out, whether it's ASAP or 60/60 or something else, to that customer within 60 minutes, and you, the customer, in the way. The other problem is all of online sales is dependent on availability. So I click on the website and I see these carrots in a certain size, and they go to the shelf to pick it, but Mrs. Jones got there first and picked it. When it's in a dark store, they can immediately know what the inventory is, so they can accurately promise to what they deliver to the customer. So it's a big thing. What we're seeing overseas is a development of a hybrid. So the retail store will have behind it an MFC, a multifunctional micro-fulfillment center, which is dedicated only to picking the online orders. So together with a retail store in the front, which is customer-centric, you have an online store at the back of the store using the space and picking orders for delivery. And there they're using automation and mini loads and auto store systems, which pick those orders by unit for the customer very fast, very accurately, and the availability and the offer to promise to the customer is accurate. And we're going to start to see that happening in South Africa quite soon. Also, remembering the cost to deliver these offers that we're doing to the customers at the moment, we jumped in with COVID, is actually a double cost. We're shipping the product from a DC to a store. We're merchandising the shelf. We're then sending someone down the aisle, which we're paying for, to pick it, and then delivering to the customer's home, which used to be the free part because the customer paid for that. Okay, so that step of merchandising needs to come out of the supply chain, because that's actually a waste for the online orders. So that's going to change. And with data and RFID and IoT technologies, we're starting to know where the trends are. We're starting to be able to model the whole supply chain in a much better way, so that we can actually plan and work out where the breaks are of what capacity we need for this type of technology, what the capacity we need for this, and we can do it very accurately today with technology. So it's the digitalization of the supply chain is the big change that's happening.
I think it's time probably to wrap up, but just a final thought from you, Gary. I think sustainability in a world of ESG and all kinds of pressures on every aspect of the supply chain, you must have that forefront of your mind when you're looking at design and the way in which we're going to evolve distribution into the future.
So when we created our company Relog in 2019, we decided, we broke away from our previous company, we bought over the office, and we decided one of our core differentiators was to actually be focused on sustainability. And hence our color of our logo is green. And everything you're seeing in the new Pick and Pay distribution center hinges on sustainability and environmental impact. So if you are efficient in your operation in the DC, you're going to use less energy. You're going to have less people, less machines to charge. You're going to get higher pick rates and a higher productivity, and therefore use less resources. So we design as industrial engineers around efficiency, which we're driving the process for Pick and Pay, but at the same time using all the latest technologies in sustainability, the solar energy. So the particular Pick and Pay building has been designed in such a way that the waste heat from the refrigeration plant feeds the heating system for the crate washer. So we get the crate washers washed with zero energy being put in to warm up the water. The waste water from the crate washer is being used to wash the trucks. So, and all of that was planned right from day one to try and get cost efficiency. Now, in supply chain, one of the fundamentals is you buy product from the supplier pretty much at the same price, whether you Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Woolworths, Spar. The supplier, Tiger Brands, doesn't really care who you are, as long as he's getting his producer price, his margin, and his markup. So they'll give you a special price this week because you Pick and Pay, and next week they'll have a promotion with the opposition and so on. But at the end of the day, from the point you take the product from the supplier to the point you put it on your shelf, which is the supply chain, if you can do that faster, cheaper, more efficient, then you can make a difference. And that's what our target is in the design of this new center, to give Pick and Pay that advantage of being able to take out those wasteful costs. And a lot of that is in environmental costs. And 60% of your cost in supply chain is transport. So one of the things I mentioned right up front was the ability to co-load trucks so that we can send one truck to a store with perishables and ambient product, shortens our travel on the road. The design of the site, for example, we refuel our trucks as we come into the site. That means we don't circulate to fueling stations. We save 10 minutes per truck trip on site just by fueling at the entrance, which if you take that 10 minutes out on a fleet of 400 trucks, you're probably saving 40 trucks a day on the road. So it's those little things that all add up, and that's the sustainability. And luckily, Fortress gave us carte blanche on the site layout to be able to do all these innovative things. So it was a really exciting partnership in developing it with Pick and Pay, with Fortress, to actually build this exciting center.
It's wonderful to see the collaborations and the multiple uses of stuff and the real focus on cutting down on waste and ensuring that we save some time. Mike, what are the big trends that you're seeing as we wrap up?
Well, I think it's bigger and more efficiency. Everyone's chasing that final objective of getting economies of scale, and I think the challenges, what we've heard today, the challenges that e-commerce is bringing to all spheres of the economy are going to push us into different spaces around how we achieve those efficiencies and scalability. The double cost that the colleagues talk about around picking at a store. We've got to find a solution for that. So I think the trends will be pushing towards finding innovation, different ways of doing things to cut down that level of cost. I think my final thought on today's discussion is around planning. We as corporates in South Africa, in this country, need to start putting pressure on the right players for action, government. It takes a long time to think about these things. We talked about this particular Pick and Pay store 3 years, 4 years in the making. We all get involved so early. It's time government got involved early too.
Or perhaps not. Maybe it works better without. But yes, your point is well made. What about you, Marcel?
Yes, thanks, Bruce. I think in summary, I think we, from a Pick and Pay point of view, I know today was about the distribution center or the warehouse that we're building, which is really impressive. But we don't see it that way at all. We see this as building a really, really strong and competitive value chain, right? From our supplier right onto our shelf. And this is one of our enablers. And Pick n Pay is in a really, really good space at this moment. We've got a really clear plan of where we want to go. We've got a really well-defined customer value proposition, which is differentiated into our new channels. And this distribution center and supply chain is one of the enablers that I believe is going to differentiate us in the market. This is a really exciting place for us to be, I think, in FMCG or in retail SA. At the center of a value chain, the supply chain, I think where it belongs. And our business has got a lot of good momentum. As I say, it's got a really clear goal. And I'm just really privileged to be part of this team and to be in this moment to actually experience that.
Marcel, thank you. Stephen Brown, last word to you. I mean, you've really got to be at the cutting edge and beyond in terms of the innovations that are required in the sector decades hence.
Yeah, I think so, Bruce. It's just, as everybody's touched on, it's about optimization and efficiencies. It's about doing more with less and about creating flexibility for the future so we don't, waste. I guess with a warehouse, there's a lot of embedded carbon, the steel that, Mike buys ultimately probably from Arcel or Mittal's there's a lot of embedded carbon in what we do. And the more efficient and flexible we can make these warehouses so that they, let's hope, last 100 years and still have a use down the line, that's really where the big saving is on a carbon emissions perspective. And then it's just those little incremental changes that we make, as Gary said, just those small little design efficiencies. And I think if we all focus on those, we'll have a much more efficient supply chain at the end of the day, which ultimately is going to be more sustainable and going to cost the end user, the customer, less. We're doing things like just adding smart meters, which have alerts for our tenants when there's a water leak or an unusual consumption pattern. And I mean, that just kind of is obvious, but I think we all live in, homes, and when we have a whole lot of electricity usage, we're probably only finding out about it 6 weeks after the fact. And what do? Well, we don't know. We scratch our heads and wonder. So I think with, those little efficient interim steps and just optimization of everything, we're going to, hopefully start to have a positive impact on the planet in which we all live.
Panel, thank you so much. It was really awesome having all of you with us today. Some really deep and granular insight into the complex world of logistics and this massive expansion that we're seeing, not only here, but in many, many parts of the world. Thank you also for taking time to join us today. It's been a great pleasure having you online with us as well. On behalf of Fortress Real Estate, thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.